Hey, Saagar, what is on your radar?
Well, Ryan, we've covered in detail here over the last few days how certain elements within the intelligence community are partnering with elite Democrats and neocons to destroy any chance that the Trump administration has at peace in Afghanistan. It is one of the most transparent Washington hit jobs I've ever seen. And predictably, like hit jobs of this nature, the more that you learn about the so-called intelligence itself, the more you learn about why you should always be skeptical of these types of reports. Recall, the original Friday New York Times report said that intelligence showing the Russian intelligence officers were offering up bounties on American soldiers' heads in Afghanistan was briefed to President Donald Trump in earlier months, and that his administration had not done anything in response since. So that inflammatory reporting is what set off the maelstrom in calls for blood of Russian soldiers in Afghanistan, from everyone from Nancy Pelosi to Russiagate Queen herself, Rachel Maddow. Well, as usual with these stories, there's a lot more to it. The Times' second shot at the story now definitely does not say that Trump was ever actually briefed on the materials, only that parts of the intelligence itself were included in a written presidential daily brief, while the White House maintains it was never actually communicated to Trump by his verbal briefers. But the most damning piece for the Times and Russiagators is information that the intelligence community itself doesn't even agree on the veracity of the reports. The National Security Agency reportedly, quote, strongly dissented from other intelligence agencies' assessments that Russia paid bounties for the killing of U.S. soldiers. It was the CIA, which reportedly based their assessments on human intelligence and Afghan government sources, which led to their conclusion. Well, gee, guess which government desperately doesn't want the U.S. to leave? Because we pay all their bills and we let our troops die so that they can grift off of our aid dollars. You guessed it. It's called the Afghan government. You will not hear any skepticism or parsing like this from Democrats, Republicans, or MSNBC. They have already convicted Trump with the caveat of, quote, if true. Here's Biden doing the same thing yesterday.
If these allegations are true and he did nothing about any of this, then in fact I think the public should, unrelated to my running, conclude that this man isn't fit to be president of the United States of America.
Dereliction of duty, he says. Congressman Max Rose, he took to MSNBC to continue the party line, repeating that American soldiers are being left out to dry.
But look, I'm sick to my stomach over this. Sick to my stomach as a member of Congress, a patriot, but also as someone who served in Afghanistan. And let me tell you something that I learned in Afghanistan. It's complicated enough. It's dangerous enough for our soldiers without having to consider Russian bounties that our country's not doing anything to address.
Now, what is the logical consequence of all of this rhetoric? Actually, you don't even have to wonder, because neocons can never help themselves from saying the quiet part out loud. The same, of course, from the Republican Senator Ben Sasse, who told Politico that all he wants to see from the White House right now is, quote, their plan for Taliban and GRU agents in body bags. Pause for a moment and consider that. That is a sitting United States Senator who says he wants to hear a plan from the White House of the United States for killing Russian intelligence officers on Afghan soil. That is sheer madness. The easiest way to protect American troops is to do exactly what the Trump administration is doing, which is trying to sign a long-term peace deal with the Taliban and end our long-term military involvement in that country forever. Russiagators at MSNBC, Biden, and neocon Republicans are getting played like fiddles in one of the most transparent bids that I've ever seen to manufacture consent for a prolonged occupation of Afghanistan with a proxy war with Russia to boot. Nothing poses more of a threat to the safety and security of American lives in Afghanistan than our ill-defined mission there. How many thousands more have died for a mission statement for that changes year after year, and which the American populace has voted 3 separate times to get themselves out of? And the worst part is, nobody ever pays a price in America for being too hawkish. Ben Sasse's warmongering will see him face no penalty. Biden will face no penalty for doing an about-face on Afghanistan. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow won't pay a price if American soldiers are killed fighting Russians in Afghanistan. The only price that is paid is the same one that's always paid: the blood of the United States military for the sins of Washington elites. And it's incredible, Ryan, that Ben Sasse comes out and just says, I want to see GRU agents in body bags. That's as a matter of government policy. Again, I would love to see that if these guys were actually paying. But you know what? No, that's not how actual government policy works, because our sole objective is to protect our actual soldiers' lives. And the intelligence community, even the NSA, doesn't agree with this thing. But people are, if true, they're ready to go to war. It's insane.
Yeah, there's no reason to think that leaving troops in Afghanistan for another 20 years is going to result in anything more than more violence in Afghanistan, more American troops dying, and the possibility of shooting interactions with Russian agents or Russian troops or Russian personnel that then escalates into something much bigger, which, like you said, is something that there are plenty of people within the United States who would be comfortable with. Now, I think it's true that the Democrats are being played like a fiddle here, but they're being played like a fiddle that wants to be played.
Yes.
They're absolutely happy to see Trump getting knocked around by this story, and happy to throw on the if true, then Donald Trump, is disqualified from being president.
Yes. Well, what really bothers me is the lack of skepticism, the if trues, the it must we respond. We must. And I'm like, again, this is madness, because they're saying it out loud. They want to kill Russians in Afghanistan. I did not vote for a war with Russia in Afghanistan. It's a nuclear power. I want nothing to do with something like that. This is the exact, and I bet if you polled the American people, 90% of them would say, I want nothing, I want to get the hell out of there. We don't want nothing to do with what's going on there. And over and over again, it's considered, like Ben Sasse and others and Rachel Maddow, they get to beat their chests and say, we need to take on the Russians in Afghanistan. Okay, you want to send your family members to go fight Russians in Afghanistan? Do you want to go and fight in one of the most corrupt countries in the world? And then that's the other thing, is that we have these sources. I was reading, because, you got to parse the intelligence on this stuff. They're like, well, according to the Afghan government, who says that they arrested. I'm like, I don't trust these people. They've been stealing for us from 20 years. I know, actually, some of the people who were stolen from. One of my favorite stories is about how we pay hundreds of millions of dollars for gas for the Afghans, for the Afghan military. And the Afghans keep requisitioning all this gas from the military. They're like, how are they blowing through all this petrol? Guess what? Selling it on the black market. They literally take it from the government, sell it on the black market, and then they charge Uncle Sam. We all pay for that gas while all these people, these warlords, are getting rich. I don't want to fight for that. And every month or two, right, we have like couples. What the Pentagon and all these other people figured out is if like 30 people die a year in Afghanistan, most people won't say anything, right? It's a tragedy. Everyone's like, oh, it's a tragedy. He's an American hero, right? What are these people dying for, right? They're like fighting ISIS in Afghanistan. I'm like, what did we? Now there's ISIS in Afghanistan, and sure, there's like a small group of dudes, but like, does that really require us going on all these? I can go on and on about this. Again, there's zero skepticism, and the worst part, in my view, is that the window for the peace deal is closing, because you're seeing that the neocon Republicans in the Senate still have all the power, and that as long as the House Democrats have a political incentive in order to be Russiagate, have to have Russiagate madness, there's no political space for actually getting the hell out of that country and doing what the American people want. And
a main driver of this is that most of the money that we allegedly spend on the war in Afghanistan actually never leaves Northern Virginia.
Of course, right? Yeah, it's a giant money transfer.
Spent right there.
Yeah.
The next highest recipients are then Doha, Abu Dhabi,
right?
And it's an extraordinary development project for Qatar and the UAE, because all of that money that you talked about with the gasoline, that type of money gets put on planes and flown to Abu Dhabi and Qatar. And often in planes.
Yes.
Where it gets laundered. It's like a giant mob run area where they kind of cleanse money from around the world. That doesn't get talked about much, but there's a network of these national security officials who move in and out of places like Boeing and Raytheon and other weapons makers, and then back into private government, back into public service. And so, if you cut off this 20-year gravy train, now that also fuels a genuine ideology. It fuels and funds a genuine ideology, but some of it is just financially driven.
A lot of it is rank corruption, but a lot of it is ideology. I mean, I talk about that here a lot, which is the power of ideology. But I think that we can't ever discount just the sheer amount of money that exchanges hands. How many of these ex-generals go and serve as boutique consulting, which get cut $50,000 a month checks from the Abu Dhabi government, who has a financial interest in making sure that the Afghan war continues on the guise of protecting American lives? I mean, the more that you break this thing down over and over again, you just see that it's all a grift. And whenever these people who are beating their chest for more Russian blood in Afghanistan. Again, who wants that? Russian blood in Afghanistan, or they want to prolong the U.S. presence there, derail the peace process. The same people pay. I grew up with some of them, people who serve in the United States military. I know people who've lost limbs in Afghanistan. And right before we go, I'll just tell this. I was lamenting to him, one of my friends, one day. I said, man, can you believe the Taliban retook this district? And you know what he said? He goes, that's where I lost my arm. So the same place where he lost his arm, where him and his unit were, hit an IED, was exactly the same place that day. This was like 2015 or something, which had just been retaken by the Taliban. What did he lose his arm for? Right? I mean, and nobody can answer that question, and nobody will ever, go to his, their family and all these others and say this is why your friend was killed, or to this person, or to so many others. There are thousands of people that happened to, and just nobody ever thinks about them in D.C., and nobody ever pays a price. Anyway, Ryan's got to share his thoughts on his latest developments. This is a very interesting one with AOC, Bernie Sanders, and AIPAC when Rising continues.